Hi, everyone, and welcome to Go Ahead Tell Me. My name is Carly, and today I'm joined by Andrea Cardenas to talk about her work in civic engagement as well as the importance of the upcoming midterm elections. Andrea, I'm so excited to talk to you today and appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. To get started, can you tell us a bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. I actually I have a lot of hats, but a part of what I do is engaging young folks and disenfranchised communities in the electoral process. I currently work as a communications director in a political firm, so I do a lot of that mail that people receive in their mailboxes during election season, which I'm sure is very fun. But I do some of that, and I'm also an elected official here in Chula Vista. I'm a city council member.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Um,
Yes.
Sorry, it cut out there for a second in the beginning, and I'm not sure if I think you said you started when you were 14 years old. What was it that got you started? I'm not sure if you had explained that a little bit previously.
I just cut off a little bit, but so I actually got involved because my brother he's 9 years older than me, and he started working in political campaigns. He got recruited out of his high school to work on a voucher campaign for the California
Mm,
Teachers Association statewide, that was tackling a lot of the issues that we see now. So like the charter schools and things like that. And so he started at a young age. By the time that I was in high school, as a sophomore, he had many different jobs around the area. However, he actually developed and honed in a lot of his skills in Orange County rather than in San Diego. And I
mm,
can go into that part a little bit more, but he eventually was like, "This life is not for me. It's
mm,
too much going on." But then when the state party was looking for someone that could help do an outreach and organizing program, and they decided to base it in South County in San Diego rather than where it's normally done, which is around Claremont Mesa. And so they needed somebody that could, speak the language, that had some prior experience, that could really direct that program. And so he started that, and he needed volunteers. And so he asked me to come in, and of course I was reluctant because I'm a little sister. But he said, just come in with you and a few friends, and we'll work together on making it fun and making it a fun space for you all. And essentially that's what got me in. When
Wow.
when I got there, it was very, very, very interesting. A lot of the things that we were working on, I for some reason got very interested at that age to find out really like why were we communicating with certain people, like what was it that like made why did we say certain things on the phone, like what was it. I mean, now I know it, like I was interested in the messaging, right, and the
Hmm.
targeting of a campaign. And so I was very, 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 very fortunate to have a lot of great mentors at the time,
Hmm.
that I mean, only the director of communications for our supervisor Nora Vargas, here in San Diego.
Oh, wow.
And so she was amazing in teaching me a lot of that, those that nuance and whatnot. And eventually, what I ended up doing there is growing as a organizer, and it was very interesting at that time to learn how to manage people that were into what they, what we needed them to do. Both my parents are immigrants. I've
Mhm.
actually both my siblings are immigrants. I'm the only one that was born here,
Oh.
and we always lived in apartments and whatnot. And my parents bought a home and they lost it when I was around two, and it
Mm,
really shaped their lives, right? Like the way that um, the rest of our life kind of developed,
mhm,
it became a basis for that. And so it was very, I was always very aware of the situation and starting to learn how to maybe not solve it, but understand the importance that every one of us has in making sure that we start getting more of the resources that we need, that was very, very interesting to me. And you know, you're 14, and you don't have a vote or anything, but you learn that your voice counts a lot more than one vote, right? Because you can start, um, you making phone calls, right? You're contacting thousands of people that have a vote that maybe wouldn't have voted, and so
Mhm.
that that impact is undeniable. And then, furthermore, the impact of having young people involved, especially in an immigrant community, and I say this a lot, was huge, right? Because I know that for me, I was the person when I was 9, especially because my siblings were much older than me and moved out. I was the one making, you know, doctor's appointments for my parents. I was, you
Mhm.
know, reading the mail, and I was kind of, you take this leadership role as a child of an immigrant, where you really set in a lot of the
Mhm.
institutional ways they're unaware of, right? There's a lack of information that's being sent out to people in a way that's culturally competent, that resonates with them. And so, so that was something that I knew from experience, and I also knew that I wasn't the only kid, right? That was that, and
Right.
so, under the impact of young people really getting the importance and understanding why being civically engaged or why voting was important. Not only did it help shape some of the votes in our area, right? But it
Mhm.
also had a generation of voters in
Mhm.
South County, where, look, maybe out of the thousands of students we've worked with, maybe like 4% of them got into politics, right? In some shape, way, or form. Like a few of them, like, you know, I have former students that work for the Senate President Pro Tem. Have others that become consultants, right? Like they some of them do gravitate and like it, right? But
Mhm.
if anything, you're creating people that are aware of why it matters for them to vote, why it matters for them to tell their family to vote. I mean, the amount of texts that I get on a regular, you know, election season is, hey, I got my ballot. Where do I return it? How do I vote? Who do we like? Who do we not like? You know, and it's, you know, it's very, very amazing to kind of see that, because it's not the norm. And
Mhm.
you know, for me, like, it's very easy to get into the bubble of like, no, yeah, young people are informed, yeah, but it's a little bit harder when you look outside of the realm of, you know, the kind of organizing that's been done here in San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so remarkable that you, like, found that at such a young age and are still kind of using your knowledge now to encourage kids today to kind of find that within them as well. That's a really awesome way that you've been able to come into this kind of role so early in life, and, like, being asked to be a volunteer and then it becoming, like, your life's mission, right? I think that's really,
Right.
really amazing.
Yeah,
Um
it's been very interesting, and I'll say that, you know, when I was elected, the thing that was most exciting to me, I mean, we had at that time knowledge that, like, you know, it was fairly hard for me to lose, but we also found out that for the first time ever, young people in Chula Vista outvoted their parents, and for me that was
Wow.
the best part of it all, because it just felt like that was my life's work, right? Like that was
Mhm.
what I've been like getting to, and the fact that it impacted obviously an election that I won is awesome. You know, even during the pandemic, but it
Yeah.
was really, really something that it was just I had no words. Like that was the thing that made me emotional on election day.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, congratulations on that. That's like a huge goal in itself just to see those numbers and know that what you're doing is really like paid off.
As you would see, like a 16-year-old, right, telling people where they're calling, what they're doing, which areas they're gonna go walk, like, and we really give them that power, for them to
Mhm.
become leaders, and it's not always like a shiny and great for like some folks. Like some folks don't like it. They're not comfortable with it. They, you
Mhm.
know, they have issues with the fact that they have a 15-year-old girl telling them, you know, sit down in that room and this is the phone calls you're gonna make, right? And it would there, you know, we would. I've been through a plethora of like situations where you have candidates or elected officials like complaining, right? Because they're like, well, like, no, like I want to do this, right? And they're like, no, well, what did they tell you, you know, like, and then they're like, but and I'm like, they know more than you think and that you give them credit for. And really young people are the people that know what's happening in their households, right? They feel
Hmm.
the economy shifts, even if that's not how they can they call it, right? But they know if their parents are working two jobs, they know if there's a lack of access to childcare, they know what's cooking in the kitchen and on the TVs. That's the way that we like to say it,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like they feel a lot of the impacts of the decisions that we're making every day at a higher level because it's their family.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it wasn't always like very greatly taken in, right? But it was always something that we stuck to. I had an opportunity to continue working with my brother, which was it was fun because in politics it's hard to kind of find people that you're gonna trust. And when you know that the person that you're working with all the time is someone that's gonna have your back no matter what, it's always very rewarding. And so we would just make sure that people knew that the students were in charge. Like it became a whole thing of like, oh yeah, South County, there's all the students, right? Like, like they're the ones that are running the program. But it allowed us to extend beyond where folks normally reach out to,
Yeah.
and who they're talking to, right? And so yeah, it's definitely a rewarding experience.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I can't imagine the impact you're making on other kids' lives, because I know that so many kids feel like they don't have a voice, and if they're not 18 and they can't vote, then what's the point of being involved? And like, I mean, I was probably even guilty of that as a kid myself, like not understanding like what it meant to get involved in political things and to understand the things going on around you. And I'm sure you've made an impact on someone that's going to be a 14-year-old kid and then later on going to be doing something similar to what you're doing. So I think it's such important work to do, to give kids the like understanding that they do have a voice even if they're not old enough to vote yet. Like I think back to when I was a kid and like just not really fully comprehending the power of just having a voice and making your voice heard, whether it be through election or just like under even just understanding and be able to have conversations about it. The midterm elections are coming up, but I think a lot of us don't realize like the importance of participating in them. Do you mind sharing like what you know about these elections and what the like voting on these can have an effect on?
Sure. So something that I always like to talk to students about specifically, and it expands at one point, is the fact that like how does every election make a difference to you, right? And
Hmm.
currently, for example, here in Chula Vista where I live, we have a lot of elections locally, right? So we have two open council districts out of a council of five and a mayoral race, which means that it's a lot of change, right, for the city of Chula Vista. And something that
Hmm.
we go over with young people is very much like, okay, like let's talk about impact, right? So for example, if you raise your hand if your bathrooms at school are maybe not in the best shape, right? And you obviously have students that are, oh yeah, they suck, they're the worst, right? It's like, okay, so if you go to your principal by yourself and tell them, principal, this needs to get fixed right now, like what do you think is going to happen? And they're like, well, they probably won't listen to me, right? Like, okay, well, what if you and five of your friends go and tell them, hey, like we need this to get fixed, what do you think is going to happen? Like, well, maybe maybe they'll take a notice, right? And then you're like, okay, well, how about 20, how about 30? Like they're going to start listening, right? And the same
Hmm.
thing with politics and elected officials, specifically in local politics, right? And then on top of that, it's like the other component of helping connect those dots is like, okay, well, how many of you walk to school? And then you get like several that it's like, well, how many of you feel safe walking to school, right? For example. And then you get some hands to drop, right? Like naturally. And then you go with them and, okay, well, explain to the group why you don't feel safe, right? And then you have some sidewalk at a portion of it, or there's no street lights on my way back. Like it like all of these different local issues can get fixed, right? And so
Hmm.
then you expand more and you explore like, okay, well, what can you do to change it? And I'm like, well, nothing. I can't do it. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? You know? I'm like, well, like, look around you. You're working with the future current leaders of your city. Do you think that
Mhm.
maybe having those conversations with them now about what you think are issues, do you think that would make a difference? Like, especially if you're a person that's wanting people to vote for them and doing all of these things, but it makes a difference. And so, so that kind of process, under what each vote, what it means for you personally, that's a
Mhm.
huge thing, right? And I think that with the midterm elections, we fail to see all of the smaller races that have a huge impact on us, because
Mhm.
there's no big ticket presidential election. But really, like, you look at national news, and a lot of it, gets it's not as day to day relevant to people as they may think.
Mhm.
And so, really, every obviously is important. But when you're looking at local things, and those happen especially during the midterms, those are the things that you will like be dealing with for the rest of your life. It really, you see it every day. Like, if there's more jobs
Mhm.
in your neighborhood, that's something that affects you personally. If there's better infrastructure, better roads, that affects you personally every day. All of those things that you may not understand or maybe not see how much of an impact they have on your day-to-day life,
Mhm.
they're the ones that are impacting you the most. Those midterm elections, those local elected officials are the ones that for your life are creating the most amount of change or lack thereof.
Mhm. Yeah, and I just started, like, or not just started, but I realized the importance of that. I mean, I talked to Cody, I think around this time last year,
Mm-hmm.
about the midterm elections, and that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. Like, yeah, we go through these very, like, public, and like the media is all over the presidential elections, but the ones that we're really going to feel the effects of are the midterm elections that are about our specific communities.
Right.
So I think it's so important for people to understand that, like you said, it's going to affect your daily life. So take the time to understand and vote on what you want to see changed in your community, your small community, and not just a nationwide election.
Right. And then not only is it the responsibility of the voter, it's also the responsibility of the people that are organizing in these communities to really make sure that they're reaching out to the voters, right? That they
Hmm.
are expanding the people that they talk to, that they really understand that it's not just like, oh, I'm Latino, Latinos are gonna vote for me, or like that
Hmm.
doesn't work that way, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of conversations about like identity politics and whatnot, but um, I will tell you right now that I've experienced more Latinos voting for people outside of their race, and then having them understand, like, well, you should really look into this person, right?
Hmm.
Than just naturally voting for the Latino
Hmm.
on the ballot, right? And it really is about who talked to them, who went and asked them the questions, like who went and asked what they need, and oftentimes the people that are overlooked, that are maybe like not the target voter, they're
Hmm.
the ones that end up switching the tides, especially in midterm elections, because you have a smaller voter base.
Hmm.
Special elections and midterm elections, for example, because I tell this to people all the time, right? I was actually phone banking for a candidate recently and for a special election, and I was like, you need to understand that because the voting pool is so much smaller, your vote doesn't count for one. It counts a lot more than that, because
Hmm.
just comparing it, like, you will have a greater impact every ballot you cast. And in those conversations, somehow would get all the senores and senoras to say like, oh yes, I'm gonna get all my neighbors to go and or give me their ballot so I can drop it off, which is a whole other great thing that the state of California has enacted, which is that people don't have to go personally to drop off their ballot.
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that opens up a whole window of people that wouldn't be able to, otherwise. But like you had mentioned something about how the people who are organizing it need to like focus on reaching out a little bit more. And on that note, sometimes I feel like I'm not informed enough to vote in the midterm elections, or like I'm not, I don't know exactly what's going on, like what is going to be on the ballot. And so I was wondering if you have any resources you could recommend to use in order to understand what and or who we're voting for.
Yeah, so I mean, there's always like, you could go to your local, you receive your ballot, uh, what's it called, the sample ballots in the mail,
Mm.
and that's a good way, if you are someone that has time to read through all of that. Um, but I mean, another thing that I like to tell people is what are the things that you care about, like the issues that you care about. So, for example, if you something that's important to you is reproductive justice, right? Then I would look up and see what Planned Parenthood is doing. Like, who are they
Mm.
supporting? Because all of these major organizations, they support a lot of the local candidates. They look into that because they know the impact that it has, right? Um, so yeah, understanding that there's all of these organizations that also weigh in on your local elections is important. So if you're a member of a labor union, you should see who's your labor union going to support, right? And it's not about like following these things blindly, but it is understanding like they took a significant amount of time to vet these candidates for you, and it is a way for you to be like, okay, like let me look, right? Like let me look at these people here, like do I stand for what they're saying? Like, so they've already done some sort of vetting process to even present those endorsements to you, and so that's always a good way to kind of go about it and see if you live somewhere where there's like a heated race, you're going to be receiving all these mail pieces. You're going to be seeing all these ads on Facebook because you're going to be a target most of the
Hmm.
time, right? And so maybe paying closer attention to that. It's crazy, but like when we're doing mail for campaigns, like I do mail with the understanding that people are going to look at it for about 3 to 4 seconds, right? And so how do
Hmm.
you get people to absorb as much information in 3 to 4 seconds? Because here's the other component of it, and the reason why our we maybe don't see as much progress as we want is because the people who truly need representation, they're the people that are working 2 3 jobs. They're the people that are taking care of their kids. They're the people that don't have the same access to resources as other folks that can sit down and read the voter guide, or that can go to their local city council meeting, that can be more informed, that have that privilege of being more informed. And so that portion of it is very important to understand that we can't throw all of the responsibility on the voters,
Hmm.
because those are the people. If you for me, for example, the district that I represent is primarily working class folks. They're people who it's a heavy immigrant community. During the pandemic, at the earlier stages of it, they were the ones that was the most adversely impacted because they were a lot of our essential workers, right? Like your grocery stores, your pharmacies, like all of these places that kept going. They really, really, really are made up of a lot of these communities.
Hmm.
And so while they're out all the time and talking to people all the time, they don't have the time to really sit down and just sit with the importance of each election is, right? So the simplification of it is very important. And so, but going back to your question about where can we find more information, again, I would suggest, like, if there's any issue that you heavily care about, look into what those organizations are doing, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes talking to friends and family about it is important, right? Because you, for the most part, if they're your friends and your family, you'll know that where their values are, where they stand. And other times, just if you see something that's a race that you really care about, that you have had the time to kind of like absorb, I would call them up. Call up the campaigns, right? Like, and be like,
Hmm.
these are the questions that I have, right? And for the most part, you'll get some answers, and even if the lack of answers might be telling, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so there is ways to get more actively involved. What I will say is that I think that for a long time, though, we have placed the burden of being engaged on the voter, whereas I don't believe that that is fair. And it really has to be an organized effort from the folks that are trying to get your vote. You know, you are an
Hmm.
asset for them, and so so that's something that I will say that I wouldn't. I always struggle with that conversation with people of like, I need you to vote, but I also need you to understand that it's not your fault that you don't know what's going on. It's been
Hmm.
purposely designed to keep folks from learning.
Right. Yeah, I think you've shared some really great advice. I think also I loved the idea of looking at what's important to each individual and going and finding out what you can vote on to make a difference on that one thing that's really important to you. I think that's something that could get a lot more people involved when they think of it in that way. Like they don't have to learn about things if they don't have to vote or learn about the things that don't matter to them. They can go seeking what is really important to them and make decisions from that. And I think that's a really good tip to share for people that hopefully will get more involved in wanting to take part in these elections. So thank you so much for being here and sharing all that information with us. I think you've shared some really great things that hopefully the listeners take and participate in the midterm elections that are coming up. And I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us and taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, no, anytime. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. I mean, I'll tell you, it's not a fun topic conversation to always have with your friends. Like at one point, people just start rolling their eyes at me. So no, anytime I'm always happy to be a resource. Because you know, again, it's very important stuff. That
Absolutely.
we are often taken for granted, and and we often take for granted the power that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, congratulations on the impact you've made and getting your 14-year-old self into this amazing career you have.
Thank
So,
you.
congratulations and thanks again. Thank you to all of the listeners for joining us today. If you weren't already, hopefully Andrea's tips and experience helped to inspire you to research the issues on this year's ballots before casting your vote. Like Andrea said, every vote really does count. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and subscribe to Go Ahead Tell Me so you don't miss an episode. Talk to you all soon.